And we are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Uru panel. We are going to be discussing, this panel is discussing Uru as released, and we're meeting with a number of current and former scientists. So, and they've got a fun idea for in order to introduce themselves in. So go for it.
Hi, I'm Steve Ogden. I was, I guess, the first one out of this group that was present in the building.
When did you start and what did you do?
I started in November 1998, and I was an environmental artist and then assistant AD for a while. Yeah, that's about it.
Sounds good.
I think I came on after Steve a year later. My first contact with Cyan was through Og. I don't know if you remember this, but I sent you a render of a tape measure.
That's right, you did.
Do you remember that?
Now I do. I wouldn't have remembered had you not reminded me.
I spent a week on this thing. I
Yeah.
poured my heart
Why a
into
tape
it, and I
measure?
sent it to him, and he said, Steve's comment. It was like in Og style. It was like 2-sentence reply, maybe. Good job. Now do the next one. And I was like, I'm exhausted. So, but that got me talking to Cyan, and then I came out and visited, and then I came on board in October of '99.
Awesome. Pretty funny. Do another one.
I'm Mike Hines. I was various things, some mixture of technical and art lead stuff, different points or whatever world leads or whatever we did. I can't remember exactly when we arrived, but I came with the whole Headspin crew. So we were developing the engine that Uru was based on in North Carolina at a company called Headspin. And basically all of us and all the technology got bought, and we all packed everything up and moved all the way across the country and showed up here. And it was like a magical world of crazy star domes and basalt pillars and all kinds of awesome. So yeah, I don't remember exactly when we got here, but I think it was late '99 as well. Like,
Yeah.
It feels like it was.
I think that's right. Yeah.
It felt like November '99 as you were saying it, but that's
Yeah,
just
I think that's right. So I remember that we had to schedule our stops along the way so that Adrian could watch Felicity at the hotel stops. So that was awesome. I'm sure Adrian will appreciate me sharing that piece of information if he ever sees this. So anyway, yeah, that's me.
I'm Eric. I started in late July, early August of 2000. And I was hired by the other people on this panel, which is the reason I've called you all here, to blame you for the fact that I'm locked in the company still. No, it's
still there. The rest of us escaped. He's still there.
He's still there. Help, guys.
Sounds good.
And Doug McBride, hopefully he can stop by too. He was before me, but of this panel, I was the last hire. So yeah.
Yeah, you had a fun reel. I think you submitted a VHS reel to us back in the days of the videotape. And
Really?
the biggest thing I can remember, there was a caution label you'd made on that thing, and I loved that thing. It just looked like everything was exploding.
I'm not going to go do it, but if I got up, I could walk about 10 feet over there and dig those VHS. I still have those VHS tapes that I.
Yep.
Yep.
But it was a good demo. Like everybody that we hired, it was because something amazing in their portfolio was there. It wasn't like, I don't know. I guess that's how you always hire everybody. But so I just remember you guys all had something amazing that we could talk about when you got there. And I think yours was, you had some crazy Sting song on there.
Yeah.
That only I knew.
Yeah.
And the whole room, they were like, "What's on the music?" I was like, "That's a Sting song." I don't even remember what it's called. Saint somebody into something.
And the burning train, or I forget what it. Yeah.
Who knows what it was? But it was funny that out of all the songs I knew, it's like, oh, I know that. So remember, kids, When you send a VHS, put a song on there that someone knows.
Yeah.
When you send a VHS.
Somebody right now is going,
Yeah.
what's a VHS?
Oh
Yeah.
no.
We're sorry to make you all feel old.
Oh,
I don't know
no.
if we got a VHS in the mail. I think I'd be intrigued.
Honestly, yeah.
You'd have to play it. You'd be like, you'd call everybody in. Hang on,
Yeah.
guys. Ready?
Yeah.
This is going to be great.
Where
Yeah, good luck
gotta
finding a
rent
player.
VCR.
Do it found
Yeah.
footage style.
But like Og, if somebody was applying to your current company and they sent in a VHS, I mean, real talk, you'd throw that in the trash? There's no way you'd be like, well, let me go find a VCR.
It depends on what kind of a mood I was in. Like, I mean, honest to God, one of the ADs that we had kept this thing called the Wall of Shame, and it followed him from company to company, and he would just put the worst portfolios in there. So once in a while, he's like, you know what, I'm feeling a little crappy today. I'm going to whip this out. And he'd call people in his offices, like, let's just go through these things and remember, you know, kind of where you start and where you wind up. And because everybody starts at the same place, and then you just kind of go on from there. But it was astounding to see some of the stuff you get. You know, a 5-page pseudo pornographic comment from somebody who wants to be an environment artist, and you're just like, it's not good. I'm not going to hire you, but we need to keep this. Things like that. So you never know what's going to be on that VHS. It could be, who knows what you're going to get. So it could be one of those, okay, guys, everyone got a drink? All right, here we go. Yeah, it could be that. But probably we'd ignore it. You're right.
Oh man.
So obviously Uru came out in 2003, but work started on it well before then. So we've already got some questions filtering in about that. But what was it like in some of the, the early years before anybody was brought down there for, the alpha and beta tests, when it was just you guys working on it, possibly even back when it was called Dirt? Do you guys have any stories about that you want to share?
I'd love to hear Og's take on, because like I didn't realize that you were there more than 2 years before I started.
Yeah.
Those had to be weird years.
I mean, I didn't want to jump in on the question, but it's funny, Quinn, when you said Dirt, the very first thing I was going to say is, hey, back in the old days, it was called Dunny in real time, or Dirt. But yeah, it was an interesting interview because for years I'd been trying to get to Cyan, and I couldn't get arrested. And I made friends, like some of these guys here, I made friends with some of the people that were working there. One of the people I made friends with was Josh Staub and his wife Bonnie, who was sort of the HR manager / hiring manager there for a while. And just kind of kept sending them stuff, and they'd send back. It was really nice to be able to have somebody who could send back and say, well, this isn't really for us, but I wasn't being completely ignored. I am going somewhere with this story. But so finally, by the time I had done kind of like what I had suggested to Bill, like I had done a couple of renders, and then they sent back and said, this is nice, but you should really do some more stuff so we can see what else you got. I kept doing it. And I developed this technique where really you could get a lot of detail on something when you zoomed in. You could have a texture map that was higher density than the one that you see at a farther away distance. That wasn't something that was really in a lot of use back in 1997, 1996. It's something I felt like I pioneered. So I had done a couple of props and environments using that technique, and I sent it in, and finally got to the point that Cyan was hiring, and Josh thought that it was good enough to get me in for a chat, so they brought me in. And so halfway through the interview, they asked me how I was getting the detail in these rocks that when you zoomed in, you got more detail. And I said, I call it a detail map, where you basically put this detail in, and as you zoom in, it gets, you get closer, it gets more present. And as you go farther away, it disappears. And this really weird look flashed between the people at the table, which was Josh and Chris Brandkamp and Tony, who I guess was the COO, maybe still is the COO.
Yeah, I think president. Yeah.
Tony Fryman.
Yeah.
They all looked at each other, like exchanging some look that I didn't understand. Well, that was something they had just come up with that week on the Dunny in real time environment that they had been working on. So what they then played for me was this shot of the shaft, the great big, Dunny shaft that had stairs all the way around it. Back in those days, stairs all the way around it, and then they were just starting to put in an elevator because they realized no one is going to walk down 1,000 flights from the top, from the cleft down to the bottom. So anyway, they zoomed in on one of the walls, and it did exactly what my clips had been doing in the renders I did, but it was doing it real time. So I guess the guys at Headspin had just developed this detail map technology. So it was interesting to see. Really, all there was the shaft, this prototype elevator, which was a box back then, and this great big round floor with a cap that could rise up. It was a puzzle. You raised up the cap, and you could jump down there and run down some tunnels. So all the game was the shaft, some caves, and some tunnels. But it was really neat, and it felt like, okay, I can see a way to do this, because I didn't understand how you would do a real-time Myst game. Anyway, that's my long story, but that's what it was like back in those days. It was like just starting to figure out how to put this thing together. How do you make a puzzle game? How do you do it in real time? How do you do it in third person? So that's kind of how it was back then.
Mm-hmm. It was, I mean, we can't overstate how bleeding edge the work was at the time and how unusual it was to see what Cyan was doing. I told this story briefly last year, but I'll tell a condensed version of it. Before I got hired, so this is a couple of years after the time that Og just explained, I was interviewing around at different companies, and there was a company in Minnesota that I interviewed with that stated to me one of their objectives was to try to do a game that looked as good as Riven, but do it in real time. And I laughed at them because that was ridiculous. You couldn't do that. And it was just a few months later that I got a call back from Cyan after they rejected me. That was the story I told yesterday. I got a rejection letter. It's still hanging on the wall in my office. I think they forgot, and they emailed me and said, hey, do you want to come in? And so I came in and talked to these guys, and they sat me down in the conference room at Cyan and showed me it was the Cleft. And by that time, it was also Teledon. And a couple, and the Cleft was, not the Cleft, sorry, the Descent experience and Teledon. And it was like getting hit by a truck, because I had just got done laughing at this other company for saying, there's no way that no one's doing what you're it's impossible. And meanwhile, Cyan has been secretly in under cover of night doing that for a couple of years, and it blew my socks off, and couldn't say yes fast enough. Yeah.
It was totally a shock.
Yeah, I mean, when we got hired, when we got brought on as Headspin, when Headspin got purchased, we'd already been working on. So in a lot of ways, I was working on the tech, but we weren't directly building stuff that was part of the narrative yet. So I don't think anything that we built was directly for Uru, but it was, we were building environments. Like we had some crazy big shaft, like sky pillar thing that we were building that had these ramps up it, and it was also puzzle based, and we were doing all of that to develop the graphics capabilities and the functional, like all of the scripting stuff that we were building in order to build Uru. So it was all building the tech for it, probably from, I think I started there in mid '98 or something, and that's what we were working on when I came on, was already working on the tech that ended up being the engine, the plasma engine. And it was
mid '98, so that would be like very shortly after the release of Riven, moving right into Dirt.
Oh yeah, yeah. They basically felt like they took about 6 months to kind of figure out what they wanted to do. A bunch of people that had been working on Riven decided that they wanted to go try to do something else, and so the art team by mid '98 was down to Josh Staub, who became the art director at Cyan, and Jason Basquette, who was the lead animator. That was really it. And then I was hired, so there were three of us at that point.
Okay.
But when we brought the Headspin guys, I'll just follow up on this if you don't mind, but when we brought the Headspin guys, and we had that very rudimentary Dirt experience, a lot of the puzzles and a lot of the gameplay was, how do I open this door? How do I get on the other side of this door? And so a lot of it was just finding the lever, walking over, looking around because it was in the dark and you had like this light, find a lever, pull it, the door would open, you'd go through. And the headspin guys were they were like more hardcore gamers than the rest of us. I was in it for the environments and the storytelling. And the guys at Headspin were like, yeah, but what do you do? What's to do? And so I remember working with Mike on this crazy puzzle where there was a digger that was trapped in a side tunnel, and then there was this little tiny, I forget what it was called, the scarab.
The scarab.
That was dead in the middle of. It's like a tractor that's dead in the middle of this blocked tunnel. It doesn't work. You go over to the digger that's stuck, and it's got it is actually stuck, but it runs. So you got one that runs that you can't move, one that could move but won't run. So you took the battery out of the dead one, put it in the live one, and then drove it to plow everything out of the way and dumped it into the shaft, jumped off at the last second. And Mike worked on that. I want to say he worked on that for 6 months as the tech guy, just trying to program it and try to make it so that we didn't die every time we did it. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I remember it very well.
It must have been the bane of your existence.
Strangely. Yeah, it was definitely that one was a long process, and we just kept coming back to it. And we were doing other things, bouncing back and forth, but it just took a really long time to get it fully resolved and out and working.
But it was
I was just going to mention one other thing that was really interesting, I think, from a development point of view. Like when we started the engine work, everything was software rendering. There was no such thing as hardware rendering. Like there were not graphics cards. It was all software rendering. And I remember we actually had an even more robust, like the early demos, we actually had an even more robust set of graphics features, but they would only run on really high-end machines, and you couldn't buy a video card to boost it. So it was just like, it was very limited in performance. But I remember working with MF, Mark Finch, and Ed Headspin, and developing the crazy cool visual techniques that, like, we were doing portals and all kinds of other really interesting stuff in the engine. So it was, that period of time was super interesting from an exploration point of view of just figuring out what we could do for
back then. You guys were still down in North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, we were in North Carolina still. We didn't move up until late '99. So we were working on it there, like aspects of it there for a long time. And we did start working directly with Cyan a lot later on, like in '99. Before we moved up, we basically did this demo that was that shaft I was talking, like those cloud platforms. That was our demo to basically prove that the engine could do what it needed to do for Uru. And then we all basically, that was very successful. And then they came and made offers to all of us and bought the whole thing. So.
The building must have felt pretty empty the first year you were
yeah,
there.
that's interesting.
Right?
It was really empty.
By the time I came, they'd already hired, like Gary was there, Gary Butcher and
Right.
Victoria.
Right.
And then I came, and then all of Headspin. So it went, in a couple of months, it went from like maybe 3 people to 20, 24.
That's right. And I remember when Tony Fryman called me to invite me out for the interview, he said something like, "It's my job to help grow the art department." That's what he said, grow the art department. And I didn't really understand that it was going to be growing that much and that quickly, but it really did. It just catapulted. From 3 people was, but like, you don't know, you in a building full of 3 people, and you know, that basement is beautiful. I love that building. But yeah, it didn't stay that way for long, because I think, I mean, this is where I start having old guy brain, but I think Gary came shortly after I was there, and Doug wasn't too long after. It was Doug first and then Gary. But yeah, I mean,
Doug was running the Riven forum. What was it called? Riven.
Yeah, Doug was running some event.
Wasn't it? Are you thinking of the thing that was called the List?
Yeah.
The list was the email list. Riven Guild was one of the forums.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And he was working with who's the guy? Was it Gordon, right? His buddy Gordon.
Gordon Curry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gordon Curry.
Yeah.
Good fellow. All these good fellows that we
Yeah. So we keep hearing references to the Great Shaft, which doesn't actually, as you know, an early technical demo part, which doesn't actually really show up until we don't really get to experience it until Myst 5. So at what point was the decision kind of made to switch from doing the descent path from the novels where you go in through Tiana's entrance in the volcano and walk all the way down and go through the Great Shaft, to switching to the Cleft and then a linking book.
That's so the question that you're actually asking is the separation between what was dirt
Yeah.
and what became Uru,
Okay,
right?
so you guys made
mud
that
pie.
decision
Yeah.
earlier on.
Well, I'm going to have to throw it to these guys because when I
Okay.
came in, it was shortly after the switch had been flipped, and it was now a multiplayer game instead of a single player experience. So, but I know that there was lots of discussions that happened during that time, and Rand gave a big pitch, and so I'd love to hear their thoughts about that period of time where the ship was turning, right?
Yeah. Because we're getting a lot of people asking the questions in the sidebar about, wait, all this talk about the shaft, when did we not get to do the descent? So
Mike, anybody? Bill, do you have
Bill,
anything you want to
yeah.
say?
I mean, this is the Wayback Machine, but I think the issue was because Uru's multiplayer, right? But we wanted to ease you in. A couple things. I think the city was going to be a big payoff, and we wanted to get you hooked up with friendly people. So we wanted to introduce your personal age and like the neighborhoods. So that whole beginner player experience needed to be adapted to like the online multiplayer modality. So those were the driving factors with how
Do we get a Doug?
we have a Doug, by the way.
Uh,
Doug
He's
might
gonna be
remember it
adding
better.
when he adds his audio and video, he'll be here.
Awesome.
I am certain that Doug will remember, but
Mhm.
my memory was the very first thing I worked on was the Tiana Cave, and I included things from the novels. Like there was a, hey Doug,
Hello,
Doug,
Doug.
so good to see you.
Hey,
guys.
in the novels there is a little lump of lava that's knocking against the wall, and so we'd animated that and put that in there and had the sound. So you walk into this dark cave and you hear this thumping, and then you light your, what was the little torch called? The little tiny torch. You guys remember that?
The fire marble thing?
Yeah, you put a marble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you light that. Now you can see, oh, it's just this weird thing on the wall knocking. And then if you figured out where you're supposed to go, you wandered to the back of this cave, came out, and lo and behold, this man-made tunnel. And then you maybe that's where the scarab was. And then you
I think
go
it was.
out.
No, it's adjacent to that. Yep.
Yeah. So if you didn't use the scarab to knock through, you couldn't get to the shaft. And then you get to the shaft and then you go down. So while Josh was working on the shaft and the tunnels under the shaft, I was working on the desert and the Tiana Cave. And one day, do you remember this, Doug? Rand came in, gathered everybody together under the star field, and he sat up on one of those basalt pillars. And he said, what if what you were working on wasn't what you thought you were working on? and so began his pitch for, this isn't Dunny in real time. This is mud pie.
Yeah.
Right. This is right. Do you remember this, Doug?
So yeah, I just actually told this to I'm sorry, I can't remember. Is it Philip Shane or Shane Philip? I always get his name mixed up.
Philip Shane. Yep.
Philip Shane. I just told him that story like 3 days ago, Og, because the date of that memory, which I also share, do you know what day that was?
No.
I'll tell you. Let me look it up.
It was
Cheating.
Cheating.
Yeah, cheating.
he's a data guy. This is just Doug, you guys.
No, that's good.
Let's see.
I totally forgot mud pie. I had forgotten that whole.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I don't remember what mud pie stood
All
for,
right.
but
It's like
Multi-
Yeah.
Oh,
Bill's got
So the
it.
date of that was May 16th, 1999. And the reason I remember that, Steve, is because that was the day that we then all went and saw Phantom Menace. It was
Right.
the same day.
I was going to say it was a Star Wars day, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I
Oh
remember.
my God.
we went in North Carolina. I remember that same day, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and then they probably hopped on the phone and told you what we were, changing.
Right.
And by the way, why don't you come up and join us?
Well, I think we had been working on the multiplayer tech and
I see.
doing like a bunch of the back end technical side for making all that stuff work in the first place. So I think we were kind of like already working on groundwork for it and not really necessarily realizing what the full vision of it was.
Right. So Eric, before you're going to tell us what mud pie stood
Well,
for,
Bill sounded like it was like multi-user dunny parable something interactive
Parable.
exploration or something like that. Yeah.
Parable. I
Forgot
forgot
about
Parable.
Parable too.
Parable was the code name for the project. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
forgot that.
But I think that Rand just liked it because it had the word mud in it, and he knew about
Yeah.
dungeons or whatever it was, and he's like, yeah, it's more of that.
Well, I remember seeing a video, actually. I think Eric Warman got me this video like years and years ago of Rand, and I had to be, I don't know if it was all of you guys too, but he went down to North Carolina to make the pitch about all of that. And I distinctly remember you guys, it felt like the room was kind of like, I don't know, man, that sounds huge.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot we were still sorting through so many technical challenges that it was like the idea of building a giant like multiplayer game on like essentially an MMO type environment on it was like, okay, that's a lot. That's a big ask.
Yeah.
Sure.
Eric, I do remember Warman because Og, I think you and I were on that trip to North Carolina. Probably not the first one, obviously. I'm sure Rand had trips before you and I, but I remember when you and I went out there kind of as a due diligence before we brought Headspin over, and Warman was filming most of that. And I remember seeing some of that footage later of him, Rand's kind of initial pitches to people there in North Carolina. So
I remember that. I remember the basketball game too. You remember that? We played basketball after Mike, you and I were stuck together. We were both too tired and exhausted to do it. So we kind of had a gentleman's agreement that we weren't going to harass each other too much. But Doug has only one speed and it's 100%. And that guy went up against Eric Warman, who, no offense to Eric, is like a Sasquatch. The dude is just, he's a big, hairy presence. And he was sweaty that night. And evidently, do you want to tell him what happened, Doug?
I don't remember. Oh, you'd have to tell me. I don't remember. I mean, I remember.
You went up against him and he did one of these. Your face wound up right there. And you're like, oh. And he goes, remember the stench.
I do remember that. Yeah, remember the stench.
Remember the stench. Because he was going to make sure you knew that you've been warming.
Yeah, see, it worked. That's all I remember.
He took it and he dunked it.
At some point in time, we need to put out a thing like something should be put out of just a collection of all Warman's videos from the years. I know he's done several that he's released to us, but I don't know if they've ever gone to any kind of larger audience.
I still have some of those, and a lot of them are Uru related. It was like this friend and coworker of ours would shoot these weird, like, I was going to call them artsy, but artsy is the wrong word. It was like eclectic, really off kilter videos, and just for fun, and then share them amongst the team. I've got one where it's Bill and him like describing, it was a joke promo for Uru. And so it would be like Bill was doing like little hand gestures of someone leaping across the chasm on the back of a sandwich he was holding, and it was shot as if it was like this super serious thing. I still have those videos.
You gotta share those, Eric.
I will.
Those. This feels like a set of historical documents we should all see.
That reminds me of the real one with Mike. Remember that Mike with the Coke product shot?
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
I don't remember that.
And then it
I remember
panned
that one
out,
too,
Mike's
Bill.
like, you see real Mike? He's like, hey. That
What
was back
was
when I
that
had to
for?
explain like multiplayer games.
But that was like that was actually a Coke sponsored thing.
That was a real
Yeah.
commercial. Yeah.
I forgot about that. The real Mike, yeah.
That's
right.
probably
Pull the
on
headset
YouTube.
off.
Wow.
Huh.
I just remember the tagline because there was a female avatar character too, voiced by Vicky.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Where are we gonna go next?" And Mike goes, "Everywhere else," and it zooms out, and it's
Oh, I forgot about that entirely. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember saying that over and over and over, trying to get a good take of it.
All of that sounds fantastic.
You guys were having fun after I left.
So the changeover happened with the change from dirt to mud pie, and I see what you're saying about, all right, well, we need to get people into the cavern faster. But people, were you ever thinking that you might be able to come back to that, like to the descent in the shaft, or because obviously, for the people, I know there are some newer fans in the chat who have mostly come into it with like Uru Live again, and the online revival number that we're on. And
I
with
can speak
release.
a little bit to the
Yeah.
descent part of it, because as I mean, it's no mystery that in 2003
Mhm.
the sort of the online support sort of fell out. The rug got pulled out from under us, right? So
Which is why you released the single player.
yeah, which is why it went to single player. And when Mist 5, I mean, Mist 5 was a project of necessity. Like the company needed to figure out what to do and pivot away from this MMO that was no longer an MMO. But we had done years of work, right? The Descent is a great example of that. And so we had to figure out what to do with all these assets. And so the intent was always to let the players in Uru find the shaft, find the connection between the surface eventually, but we never got a chance to do it because we didn't get a chance to. I mean, the plane never got to leave the runway. I think we went up about 10 feet and then slammed back down and the gears broke off. It's like, and so it went into Miss 5 along with a lot of the other sort of bits and odd ends that we hadn't had a chance to implement. And you know, in part that's why Miss 5 feels a little bit disjointed. It's because it was made from the bones of Uru, but
Yeah.
Well, and there's a big difference. There's probably an order of magnitude of complexity when you're coding and scripting stuff in multiplayer than in single player. And the Dirt stuff was never built for, if I'm remembering right, Dirt was all single player in mine. And then we built these multiplayer spaces, and then the timing, maybe we would have gone back and made those, you know, multiplayerified them, but the timing was such that then that just never happened. So
yeah, like even the Scarab collapsing sequence that Og described. How do you do that in multiplayer? Only the first person gets to drive the Scarab, and everybody else just gets to walk across. Yeah, it's a difficult issue.
That was the problem we kept running into. It's like, how do you, and what does it mean to have a puzzle game that if you're with 100 people, anyone can solve it, then it's already solved. And the fun is solving it yourself without 100 people watching you. So to the people asking about the shaft and the descent and all that stuff, I completely understand your fascination with that. But just so you understand, Doug and I early on, I think only a few stories had been modeled stairs.
Yeah.
You have to understand, you're in the dark and you've got your little torch, and so sooner or later there's a circle like this big moving down, and the camera's just watching you go all the way around the shaft. And having read the books, you're like, this will be cool. I'm going to walk all the way down to the bottom of the shaft. This is going to be great. And after 3 or 4 cycles, it's not great anymore.
Yeah.
And there might be some. I know some of us are completionists, and we would like to have that experience just to say you did it. And for those people, I'm sorry that we didn't do it. But I tell you, after the few times that Doug and I tried that, it's like, that's not as fun as you think. And then, I mean, the elevator was a much funner experience because first of all, you had to figure out how to turn it on. And then you got to see the shaft as you were going, all these layers going past you. And then you got down at the bottom and there was that wreck Scarab laying on the floor because you had knocked it off. And, that was great stuff. It was great stuff. So it was a really fun puzzle. But yeah, those things got abandoned. And I think taking the linking book in the bottom, in the tree room with the cleft was a much better, probably a much more streamlined thing. But you got to talk to Sandy in the desert. You got to see the Winnebago and wander around New Mexico for a minute. That's another thing. This is a thing that we kept coming up with, these ideas that would be really neat. You can walk in any direction when you're standing in the New Mexican desert, and there's, the Disney idea of the weenie at the end of the road, right? So you've got, there's your volcano. Let's go toward the interesting thing. There's a Winnebago, but you can turn around that way and just walk until you can't go anymore. We thought that would be cool. Just let you walk anywhere. It turns out walking away from the interesting things is just not as fun. But I think in terms of game design, you kind of use that to your advantage. There's nothing interesting back there. You can keep going, but the interesting stuff is all the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it sounds like a lot of people really just wanted some of the feeling of of the
Yeah.
descent from the book. And I really, just speaking personally, I really loved, as you said, the great shaft elevator sequence in Mist 5. I mean, I think that was delightful. I think people were just wondering about like plans for ongoing content, you know, after what was released in the single player,
Yeah.
Yeezus 4, Journey Age, etc. And
Right.
then we would have come out into the city because I know that things got repurposed into the offline expansions, Path of the
mhm.
Shell, where and to Dunny, where we get some of Dunny proper and we get Anone and we get Arcana. And one of the other questions we're getting is, well, can the panel talk about a little bit more about the plans for the Mist 5 Ages? How heavily were they changed from the Uru concepts? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but Escher was going to be a recurring live character, right?
Um,
Or he was
boy,
hinted
Bill, do you
at as the
remember?
Dunny survivor?
We we were definitely having discussions with David Ogden Stiers about a longer, more episodic kind of. Sorry, I'm having a lot of memories. We for whatever reason. So David Ogden Stiers, Colonel Winchester on MASH. He came out and Rod Stafford had this contraption he put on his face with cameras pointed at him to film him. And then somehow I wound it up I got to go to dinner with him because I think everybody else that they asked said no. We're busy. So yeah, I'll go. So it was me and Mark Dobratz it was me and Rand and Tony and me. I don't know why. And David Ogden Stiers. Maybe I was doing producerly type stuff at that point.
Yeah,
And
I
Mark
think at
couldn't
that
go.
time you were sort of wrangling all the odds and ends
Yeah.
that needed to get checked off for that project.
So Mr. Stiers we picked him up at his hotel and he had a gym bag. Like, was he? So in the gym bag was 4 bottles of wine. This guy was a connoisseur. These were like $200-$300 bottles of wine. And we go to dinner. I don't even remember the name. It's a nice place. Anyway, she gave a bottle to the chef and he gave a bottle to the kitchen staff, and we drank the other 2. And I'm not a wine guy, but I can see why people would be, because it was good stuff. And it was that. So I had a couple glasses of wine, and then I started asking him, I started talking business. Do you think you'd want to come out? And I see Tony looking at Tony's eyes, I wasn't supposed to do this. So anyway, we were talking to David. When I say we were talking to David Ogden Stiers, I mean Bill, after a couple glasses of wine, was asking him at dinner if he would come do more. So, so yeah,
making some budget obligations at dinner.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's great.
So,
While
yeah.
drunk.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
With regard, Capella, you brought up a question about like the plans for ever expanding content.
Yeah.
And I was actually going to ask Bill, because I know both Bill and Doug and I think everybody in here like were leading teams that were working on just the mission was to come up with crazy cool stuff that we could just keep putting. I think it was 2 or 3 ages every quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And I have memories of like Colo, which I actually recently released the demo of. I dug up the old playable file. Yeah, if you do a search for it, you'll find it. Some people actually wrote articles about like Cyan's releasing old stuff. So got a working version of Colo.
Wow.
Mike, I remember working with you on the clay model for Dunny City, and we had all these plans of like, all kinds
Robin
of crazy
Miller,
stuff.
do you remember? Robin Miller he wanted a party boat in the Dunny City. We were going to build him a barge, and he was going to show up as a celebrity and have parties on this barge in the Dunny City on the lake.
Doug and Steve, do you guys have any, like, I'm trying to think of the craziest ideas that we never got a chance to even come close to?
Christian Piccolo, do you remember him? He had an idea it was an ice runner type age.
Yeah.
You're basically delivery guy, but you started with this like starter ice runner, like a pod racer kind of thing, but with skis.
Okay.
And you'd make these deliveries and you'd earn currency in that age, and you could outfit your ice runner and do more and more. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
He had some really great.
It had like a whole economy built in just for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember the economy part. Yeah.
Okay.
I do remember a lot about the guilds because it was my responsibility to help work on some of the city work, which is why we built the big clay model. It's probably somewhere gathering dust in the building.
It's still around. Yeah.
But yeah, we had kind of plans for all the different guilds, guild maintainers and the riders and all the different factions. That was a big part of the book. And, we always tried to achieve the vision of what Rand had created in the novels, but just with technology limitations and game limitations and fun limitations, like the conjunction of what was a good novel versus what was a good game, we hit our head against many, many times. And I don't know that we actually ever successfully accomplished that goal, but there were lots of false starts and lots of little seeds and ideas. It was a very collaborative environment. Lots of people could pitch things. Like over the walls were always great sketches and concept pieces, and we had a number of great artists, that helped contribute to that vision. But I think in the end, a lot of what we wanted to get done and achieve, I think, kind of fell short of that goal, in my opinion.
It almost
Crazy
feels
thing
like
I
you were
remember-
10 years ahead of your time.
What's that?
It almost feels like you were 10 years ahead of your time, really, because all of these gorgeous, ambitious, plans and ideas, and then the technology comes into place later where you could have pulled that off.
Yeah, it's really weird to think about some of those ideas that could have flown now.
Yeah.
The craziest idea I remember, and it's crazy not from an implementation point of view, but just conceptually, there was somebody on the design crew was frequently bringing in basically ideas based on what they saw on TV last night. And one of them was I guess early on in was it Survivor?
Yeah. There was a period. There was a period there where Rand was really into Survivor, and we heard a lot about like Monday morning.
What about a Survivor age?
Yeah.
It'd be like his age, and everyone just gets thrown off except you if you win. And we were just like, yeah, Chief, I don't think so. It's like, what, you could have done that, but it's like this just doesn't feel like the same game as everything else does. And the other thing, this is where you guys get to shake your fist at me like, I can't believe you don't know that. The craziest age that I was involved with, and I left before it either became reality or it was scrapped, was the one with the 4 floating balls on a windmill. And each age, a quarter of an age was inside a ball. Did that ever make?
Yeah.
It was on a night.
We built it.
Anone made it.
Yep.
That's crazy because it was half built when I left, and I was just like, this is insane. I remember thinking how insane it was. And it was hard from a technical standpoint to get the engine to recognize that what you had done in one ball needed to carry over to the other. Like he was nodding his head like, oh yeah, that was a real pain in the butt. Yeah, it was. Anyway, I thought that was crazy. I don't remember any other crazy ideas, but Voyager Age and on a floating ball.
It occurs to me, like people, I don't know if you guys get this, but like people talk about, oh, what is it like to work in the game industry? And people have this misconception about it being this Willy Wonka dream factory nonsense, and I find myself constantly being like, no, it's hard work. And, all the things you normally tell people who are aspiring, and you want to wave them off of having a misconstrued idea about what it's like in the game industry. But I find that whenever I think back to those years, like it literally was, you guys, we got paid to like come up with crazy stuff and like dream big and try and make it happen. And sometimes we did. Some stuff did happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember the giant the wasp nest age with the flying dragons?
No.
Dragons.
Please don't tell me that one became an age. Like, yeah, that was cold.
Kahlo. Are you thinking of Kahlo with the creatures you would ride around on?
I don't know. I just remember working with an artist trying to we didn't have normal maps, trying to make this gigantic wasp nest look like it had some texture on it.
That's Kahlo. Yeah.
It is Kahlo.
Yeah.
and then you could ride on critters,
Yeah.
but they look like giant wasps. No?
Yeah, big multiplayer jousting kind of thing.
Yeah. So again, that got released after I
No, that never got released. We
never got released.
I released it like last year or
They're making
earlier
a-
this year as a goof.
or build.
Yeah.
I got you. Well, there you go then. It's funny the stages of working in the game industry, because I think when you're really, really young and you're working in the game industry and you're really excited about it, and everyone is excited about it, and you meet other adults, other parents of other children at events, parties, and you're at the pool or whatever, and they're like, so what do you do? And you say, I work in the game industry. And you either get, that's a job, or you get, oh, that must be so fun. And yeah, you want to explain it, but you just kind of let it go by. I'm to the point now where I tell people I'm in the software industry, because at my advanced age, I'm way older than anyone in this place, I think. Yeah, far older. It's too much trouble to explain that there is a whole business, a business that may be making more money than the movie business at this point. That is an industry, and it needs creative people, and it needs business people, and whatever. I don't want to get into that discussion. I'm like, yes, I'm in software development. Oh, really? Yes. And luckily, the company I work for is called Firaxis, and that just sounds like a software company. Unless you know games, you would have no idea what Firaxis is. Oh, really? Where do you work? I work in Firaxis over in Hunt Valley. Oh, great. And then they move on to the next guy. Oh, yeah, I work for a bank. I'm good. Fine. Another beer, please. So it's funny how that works, right? Have you guys experienced the same thing?
Yeah, I just say that I work for a plumber.
You want to explain the context of that joke?
I actually work for Nintendo. But,
Yeah. That was the impression I got.
That's best.
People are delightedly talking about Firaxis in chat right now. So there you go.
But it's just astounding to me, like my memories, and I realize it's all rose tinted, right? Because I remember at the time there were things we were all pushing for and fighting for and stressing over and deadlines and can we pull this off? But like, yeah, I don't know. That whole period has a special flavor to me.
Yeah, I don't
think I can ever get back.
I feel like one of the things that makes it more so, we also didn't have a lot of barriers to what we did at Scion, which was really interesting. Like, it's the only job I've ever had in the game industry where I got to do just some of everything. Like, pretty much the only thing I didn't get to work on was the character stuff, because Jason and his team had that, and it was kind of independent somewhat. Although we even built our own characters at some point in time. I built myself as a character, and we were playing.
I think that was for the commercial.
Oh yeah, that was for the commercial. And so like it was like you got to do like everything. You got to invent ideas, like come up with concepts, work with concept art to like go back and forth on those things, like build out the world, do the scripting, do all the functionality. Like, it was just a very different experience that way than any place else I've ever worked. So
it's a great place for a generalist, especially like Mike and I and Doug.
Yeah,
because you got to do everything. Yeah, if
we ended up being in those world lead roles is because you needed to be able to just kind of do some of everything in order to do that job, and it was very cool in that way. Of course, I was going to say the challenge that we also faced, or the part that I think was not as glorious during those days that I remember being a very stressful aspect, was demos. We did a lot of demos for funding, and it was a constant kind of challenge to kind of balance the work that we were doing on the product with the work we were doing for demos. And I remember feeling at one point, I'm like, oh, I've worked on demos for like a year, and being kind of like,
I remember urging the guys that work with me to come up with what I called the pants down demo. You guys remember that? You guys remember that? I was like,
no,
we don't want to be caught with our pants down. So if somebody shows up and goes, hey, do you have a demo? We're like, yeah, right here. We knew where it was. It was in the same place. Everybody knew where it was. So that we didn't have to stop working on the game to work on a demo. And sometimes that was a really good thing to have done. And sometimes it meant people were showing things that were 6 months old. But but
at least it was there.
Yeah, and it just got to the point that we could not live up to our obligations that we've been asked to live up to while also providing these demos. So that's why the pants down The pants down demo became a thing.
Hey, Bill, did you have another story about the world lead stuff? It looked like you were about to say something. I interrupted.
Oh, just another comment that the interesting, one of the dynamics at Cyan that sticks out to me too is that if there were any personality conflicts or interpersonal conflicts, they usually arose from everybody was really invested in this personally, had a lot of ownership over it, and really wanted the best for the products from their perspective. So there were still conflicts, but they were a good kind of conflict, in my mind.
I
Totally
agree.
agree
It
with that.
felt like people trying to out-passion each other
Yeah.
for the work that we were
Yeah.
doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, and that's fairly unique, even in other game industry jobs. You don't have that same level of just I can't think of anybody who wasn't just fully on board with what was going on. So it was really special time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super thrilled that all of y'all have come around, and I'm feeling honestly really sad that we're coming up towards the end of our hour, because I feel like we could easily get another hour's worth of panel out of y'all.
I'm ready.
So
I'm ready to grab a beer with these guys and just
Yeah.
sit and talk for the rest of the day. So that's-
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think all of us would love to sit down and overhear that. Like, let's be real about that. So
I mean, the stories will get crazier and crazier.
yeah,
Just
we
like
would
that.
love to extend an invite to all of you, any of you who feel like traveling to Denver next year. I don't know if anybody either wants to fly or is local to the region, but Mysterium 2022 is Denver. So if y'all want to come out, you know,
hopefully the world will get
about
back
it.
to normal in between
Yep.
now and next year. I'm hoping.
That would be nice.
Absolutely.
Do you guys, I'm trying to dig back in the memory banks of any like just crazy stories to bring up at the tail end here, because
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Any last minute questions or silly comments about, oh man, you know what I really wish we could have done? I wish that we had done that secret puzzle that involved. Now I'm just trying to come up with some really stupid
Yeah.
conspiracy theory. You know, 8 people standing in the shape of a cone in a particular point will unlock a secret door in the Hall of Kings and drop down and reveal Kareth's tomb or something.
We
Do
thought
you guys
about
have
putting
any
a
completely ridiculous
closet
plans like that?
we thought about putting a closet in the Dunny City that had all these physical objects behind it, like cones and balls. And did we do that? Maybe we did.
like their
Open
storage
it up
storage
and-
closet.
Yeah.
Open the storage closet and items just tumble out at you.
Yeah.
I was going to ask
lot.
Bill, like when you were in charge of like I think we were calling it the live team. It was like
Yeah,
planning all of the live stuff.
Yeah.
You guys had like crazy. I mean, and with some of this got executed in the early trial, but like live actors dropping story hints in person, not procedurally.
That was
but
not going to scale well.
no.
This was not Uru was not the definition of scale.
It was
well
a horrible
internally.
idea, but we were going for it, and we were gonna have actors and time. Just it was gonna be basically a TV show.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
That was the terrifying thing, actually. When I think all of us, all 5 of us came to this realization separately, like, oh my God, this is live TV. That's what we've bargained ourselves into. And that's when it got terrifying. So like, wait a minute, I'm not prepared to do that.
Yeah.
I don't have the basic skill set for live TV.
Yep.
I keep thinking about like the only word that comes to mind is naivete, but like the things that we took a swing at.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if somebody pitched something like that in a meeting, in a biz dev meeting or a creative meeting, they'd get laughed out of the conference.
Right.
It's crazy. I mean, we had a full working, like immersive, gorgeous MMO environment where everyone was talking and hanging out as themselves. And like if you just added the VR element to it, it was basically like a current product in a lot of ways. And I feel like it's still amazing when you jump in there. I mean, it's still the servers have continue to be up and you can jump in and do this and check it out.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. It's crazy.
But like, I'm so grateful for the fact that we didn't know any better, because none of like all these memories that we're talking about, those
Yeah.
experiences wouldn't have happened if we had had
Yeah.
an ounce of wisdom to like not even try. You know, it's
We-
like, but we
yeah.
did it. We actually did make a cool thing.
We
Yeah.
might be
No one
too
told you
old to
you
do
couldn't.
this again.
Right. No one told us we couldn't. That's right. Hey, do you guys remember when they first turned on physics? And so you could take the traffic cone and turn it over and vault over things and
Oh yeah, yeah. Also, then you had gameplay, right? Like the traffic cones became like one of the most interactive, fun things to do in the city, other than just like
Up
running
around
up
the
the stairs.
yeah. And it was frequently our job to make sure that you couldn't get somewhere you weren't supposed to go by
Yeah.
putting, colliders around things. And if you didn't put them all the way up to the ceiling, you were screwed because now people could just jump over them, right? So you had a bulletproof solution that overnight became useless because people could go anywhere they wanted to.
And didn't we all get traffic cones for Christmas one year? Or there was some company
I still
meeting
have
where we actually
mine.
got
I still
cones.
have
Yeah,
mine.
yeah.
Yep.
I think I missed that one. That was probably the year I left.
Yeah.
After me.
We made tiny traffic cones with MTA from Mysterium Transit Authority on them.
Nice.
Or
Yep. We still
Giveaway.
have a whole lot of various size traffic cones at the office that fans have sent in, or
yeah.
Great.
love it.
Well, it was a pleasure to have all of you here today. Like we said, we invite you to come out to the next Mysterium. We have a Discord server if you'd like to come in and participate in chatting with fans. And, if you guys ever want to get together and do another reunion panel and just sit around, chat, and tell more stories, also feel free to reach out to the committee and we'll.
We'll do. Like I said, we did a
This
couple
is
of these last year,
hilarious.
and I
Yeah.
had people, Bill and Bryce was on last year and reached out. They both reached out and said, "This was so much fun. Let's do this again." And so I would like to do that. And this year, if we can get our act together, Cyan wants to do more streaming content and that sort of thing. So I would love to reach out to you guys as well about keeping the conversation going. And just before we finish here, I just want to express how grateful I am that you guys came out and decided to have this chat. And it just does my heart so much good to see you all. And I hope everybody's doing awesome. This is, I miss it, you guys. I miss it.
Absolutely. Good. It was good
Me
days.
too.
Thanks for having me out.
Yep.
Yeah, same here.
Thanks,
and thanks for the invite, Eric. Very much
Thank you for
appreciated.
giving us a glimpse into how special this era was.
It was pretty neat.
Mhm,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
certainly neat.
Also, happy birthday tomorrow, Eric.